Presentation is a trip report of Trevor's 2-week solo birding trip across southeast Arizona in April to May of 2021. This was his first major foray into birding outside of New York State. He started in Tucson, Arizona, and made his way around the southeast corner of the state, spending 2 to 3 days birding in various birding hotspots. The presentation will emphasize life birds, 114 in total, rarities. I don't think I have to go through every bird. I think I'll talk about it. One of them was the Lucifer hummingbird, and cool finds, possibly first ever recorded black-throated sparrow at the peak of Mount Lemon, way out of altitude range, and a close encounter with a Mexican spotted owl. Trevor is a relatively new birder who started in December of 2018 after spotting an unusual woodpecker in his backyard, which turns out to be a yellow-bellied sapsucker. This encounter sparked his growing interest in learning, experiencing, and respectfully photographing avian habitats, behavior, and biodiversity. He currently works as a physician assistant, a PA, in the fields of cardiothoracic surgery and critical care in Northwell. He holds a master's degree in physician assistant studies and bachelor's degree in health sciences at Truro College 2019 and a bachelor's degree in biology at Stony Brook University 2014. His other interests include mountain biking, road cycling, photography, and vegetable gardening. I love it. Hi, Trevor. I love it. I used to work in Northwell, so
That's great.
I was the ophthalmology residency coordinator. So
Oh, wow.
present Trevor, and Trevor, you're on.
Okay,
Okay, great.
one more quick thing before we get going. If you have a question or a comment that you think of during the presentation, could you just type it into the chat? And then we will have a Q&A at the end.
Okay.
Okay, great. So can everyone see my screen okay?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So this is kind of my about me slide, or this was kind of covered, so I'm just going to skip over that. So first, I'm going to give a quick background on the trip. So this was my first, like I said, the first birding trip outside of New York State. Took place in April and May of 2021, so a total of 2 weeks. And this was during peak migration season, so I got a lot of good looks at a lot of different birds. I started off in Phoenix, Arizona, and I drove to Tucson with a rental car, which is where the real birding began. Exploring the southeast corner of the state, there are several unique ecological zones, which I'll get into in a minute. And I explored 3 main counties. Pima County, which is where Tucson is, Santa Cruz County, which is where Madera Canyon is, and Cochise County, which was by far the most productive county of the trip. So why Southeast Arizona? Well, in Arizona, there's over 500 recorded bird species in the state, over 300 known breeding species, and it's a migration corridor for neotropical migrants. There's a few unique ecological zones, the Sonoran Desert in the southwestern portion of the state, home of the saguaro cactus, the Chihuahuan Desert to the east, and then there are these desert riparian areas, which are low-lying forested areas that are near sources of water, such as rivers and lakes. These tend to attract a very high concentration of birds. Then there's the Madrian Sky Islands, or as I refer to them, the Sky Islands. These are pine oak forests that occur in mountainous areas at higher elevations. And they're present in a number of small mountain ranges throughout both deserts. In Arizona, birds are not just stratified by geographic location, but also by elevation. So as you go up higher in elevation, the composition of species of birds changes, which we'll get into. There's also a number of Mexican specialties. These are birds that are typically native to Mexico, with their breeding range slightly overlapping into Southeast Arizona. So people specifically go here to see these birds within the United States. So this is kind of a trip overview. So as you can see, I started out in Tucson, Arizona. Then I came up to Mount Lemon, where I got my first taste of the Sky Islands. Came down south to the town of Tubac and to Madera Canyon, which is one of the premier birding destinations in the country. Came around to Patagonia Lake State Park, which is a large riparian zone. Then to the town of Sierra Vista at the base of the Huachaca Mountains, which is another Sky Island location. Is actually my favorite location of the entire trip. Then I came east or northeast up to the town of Portal near the New Mexico border. This is at the base of the Chiricahua Mountains, another very famous birding location. And then back to Tucson with a quick stop in the Wilcox Wildlife Area and Lake Cochise on the way back. So these are a bunch of locations that I hit. I'm not going to go through these. We'll go through them as I go through the presentation. I don't know why the slides are kind of going on their own. I'm not doing that. I don't know why that's doing that. So anyway, so first life bird of the trip was great-tailed grackle. These are the most widespread grackle species in the Southwest. This was seen while I was picking up my rental car. They are loud and annoying, just like the grackles back at home. And I wanted to dedicate a quick slide to my rental car. It's a Mazda 3, served me well. So first day was the first stop was a rarity. Got northern jacana. This was a long-staying rarity in the Tucson area in a small riparian stream in northern portion of Tucson. These birds are rail species that are native to Mexico and Central America. And note the very large feet to body size ratio. There are over 2,000 eBird reports of this bird, so it was a very popular rarity during its stay. Got my first taste of mammals here too. In this area was I saw my first round-tailed ground squirrel. These are fairly common along the desert lowlands, and they're fairly widely distributed throughout the Sonoran Desert. Very similar to the spotted ground squirrel, which has more of a Chihuahuan distribution. That's more to the east. Then I visited Sweetwater Wetlands. This was my first major birding destination of the trip. It's a water treatment facility that was transformed into a constructed wetland habitat in the northwest portion of Tucson. It's actually the most eBirded hotspot in the state of Arizona with over 22,000 checklists. So very, very popular spot. So a couple familiar favorites seen here, the ruddy duck, snowy egret, and pied-billed grebe. These are birds that we have in New York. And then I got my first look at a vermilion flycatcher. These are a sexually dimorphic flycatcher, common in desert riparian areas. I feel like every time I was in a riparian area, there was always a pair of these. The female on the left, male on the right. Very gorgeous breeding plumage on the male. This is a Baird's towhee. It's a towhee that's endemic to Southwest US and nearly endemic to the state of Arizona. Fairly common in low-lying desert riparian areas. Note the black mask. That's how you tell it apart from other towhees in the area. You can actually get the only endemic bird you can get on a college campus, which is Arizona State University. Lesser goldfinch, smallest goldfinch or smallest finch in North America. And then verdin, these guys are fairly common throughout the desert. They are the only member of the penduline tit family in the United States, and actually the entire Western Hemisphere. They're a very fast-moving songbird, and they move very similarly to kinglets. So very hard to photograph, but I did get one. Now for some rails, common gallinule, familiar bird. Sora, these are fairly secretive rails, though in Sweetwater Wetlands, they're not very secretive. There were a number of them feeding out in the open, so it was very cool to see. Phainopepla, these are a member of the silky flycatcher family, the only member of the silky flycatcher family in the United States. They occupy their own monotypic genus, and my first experience seeing this bird was this cute little fledgling, which was very nice to see. We got some very good looks at it. Then while I was photographing the Sora, I saw this bobcat. I did not know that there were bobcats in Sweetwater Wetlands, so this came as a surprise. It kind of snuck up on me, but good photo opportunity. Another bobcat. Oh, same bobcat, actually. So then next was my Airbnb. This was in Tucson. I picked this location because I thought it would be a good birding location. Lots of saguaro cactus on the property, and it's nestled up to this rock formation called Red Butte. This is what Red Butte looks like. Very gorgeous. Photo does not do it justice. See the saguaro cacti. Here there's also northern mockingbird, and which look a little bit different than the northern mockingbirds around us, and white-winged dove, so fairly common throughout the desert floor. They feed on saguaro cacti. They are co-present with their genus mate, the mourning dove. There's an adult Phainopepla. And then another bird with a funny sounding name that starts with a P, the Pyrrhuxia, known as the desert cardinal. They occupy the same genus as the northern cardinal, which it's co-present with. They're non-migratory and fairly common. This is the best look I got of one on day 2, which is pretty cool. Hooded oriole, desert oriole, fairly common throughout the desert, but skulky, so not often seen. And then another cool find was a purple martin. They were a little early for this region, and I did not expect to see one on a saguaro cactus, so that was a cool photo. I was glad to see that. Cactus wren. These guys are fairly common throughout the desert. They're the state bird of Arizona, largest wren in the United States, and they are almost always seen in pairs. They nest in saguaro cacti, so it's a very important part of their life cycle. And they do compete with resources with the curved-billed thrasher, which we'll see later. They're often seen having territorial disputes with each other, which I observed on a couple occasions. Gambel's quail, most common quail in the desert lowlands, fairly common throughout the Sonoran Desert. These guys are very easily flushed, so I was glad to get this photo. Most of the times when I saw them, we're accidentally flushing them. They have very rapid wing beats and they fly very fast, but only short distances. So they're kind of startling when you scare one by accident. So first hummingbird is Costus hummingbird. Occupy the same genus as Anna's hummingbird, the Calypte genus. They both coexist within the Sonoran Desert. One way to tell them apart is the gorget on the male. It has a purple gorget, which comes to a very dramatic flaring down here. Not present on the Anna's hummingbird. Gila woodpecker, very common woodpecker in the desert lowlands. They are cavity nesters. They nest in saguaro cacti, and the holes are later used by elf owls for nesting. So very important ecological role. They occupy the same genus Melanerpes as the red-bellied woodpeckers on the East Coast, and they behave very similarly and have similar vocalizations in my observation. And here's a photo of some honeybees that were pollinating saguaro cactus flowers. Thought that was pretty cool. So next location was Agua Caliente Park. It's a small park in northeast corner of Tucson at the base of Mount Lemmon. It has some ponds that are fed by a hot spring. And according to the signs at the park, it was a destination for hunter-gatherers dating back thousands of years. First animal I saw here was not a bird, but a mammal, a ringtail. Also known as a ring-tailed cat or miner's cat, but it's not actually a cat. It's related to raccoons. They're nocturnal and seldom seen, and they're the state mammal of Arizona. They're called the miner's cat because miners in the 1800s would keep them as pets. First birds I saw were Lincoln sparrow and lesser goldfinch seen foraging together, which I thought was kind of interesting. And then Lucy's warbler, a member of the Leothlypis genus, similar to Nashville warbler and Virginia's warbler, which are also present in this region. They all kind of have this little funny brown hat thing going on. They're one of the only 2 cavity nesting warblers in the United States, the other being the prothonotary warbler. I observed this one going in and out of a tree cavity, probably building nesting material. And here's the same bird. Then Wilson's warbler. Most numerous warblers seen on this trip by far, same genus as Canada warbler and red-faced warbler, which we'll see later. Then greater roadrunner, one of my favorite photos of the trip. I saw this while this guy snuck up on me while photographing the Lucy's warbler. This guy was showing off his kill, which was some sort of lizard. Often seen running on the ground. They don't often fly, so love this photo. So next was Mount Lemmon. Mount Lemmon was my first taste of the Sky Islands. It is approximately 9,000 feet at the summit. It's the tallest mountain in the Santa Catalina mountain range. So I started down here in the base at Molino Canyon, came up to Gordon Hirabashi Campground, which was actually a Japanese internment camp during World War II, and then came up to General Hitchcock Campground at a higher elevation where I noticed the species composition changing, and then came all the way up to the village of Summerhaven near the peak, around 7,000 feet, and then finally to the Marshall Gulch picnic area. This is a view from the Mount Lemmon Peak. Over here are the Santa Rita Mountains. This is Mount Wrightson, the tallest peak there. That's where Madera Canyon is down the middle. And on the left are the Rincon Mountains. Another cactus wren. Mexican jay, part of the scrub jay genus. Range overlap into southeastern United States, mostly a Mexican bird though. They were recently split with the transvolcanic jay. Common in pine oak canyons, behave very similarly to the blue jays we have back home, meaning that they're loud and raucous and travel in groups and harass other birds. This one was staring lovingly at a frying pan, which I thought was funny. Canyon towhee, fairly common in the desert lowlands. This one was seen in Molino Canyon. They're quite similar to the Abert's towhee, which I discussed before. The way to tell the difference is that this one lacks the facial masking. This one was eating a moth. Yellow-eyed junco, very similar to the dark-eyed juncos we have at home. This bird became very common as I got higher in elevation. They look quite similar, but they have the characteristic yellow eye. They're non-migratory, but really they're not non-migratory. They migrate from altitude. So low elevation in the winter, higher elevation during breeding season. So migratory warblers, both in the Setophaga genus. Hermit warbler, fairly common West Coast warbler, similar to the black-throated green warbler we have back at home. Note the the yellow head, black throat, and black nape over here, as well as wing bars. And then the Grace's warbler, often found in pine trees, though this one was not in a pine tree. The characteristic identifying feature here is this yellow eyebrow. Then as I got close to the peak, I got my first and only sighting of a pygmy nuthatch, fairly common nuthatch throughout the western half of the United States. Yeah, so that was pretty cool. And then Steller's jay occupies the same genus as the blue jays back home. I only saw these guys at higher elevations, and they're also loud and noisy, just like the blue jays back home. Then this is probably the most significant find of the entire trip. This is a black-throated sparrow, also known as the desert sparrow. And they're called the desert sparrow because they're found pretty commonly in desert lowlands. But the interesting thing here is that this was found at the peak of Mount Lemmon, over 7,000 feet. So as far as I'm aware, this is the only sighting at this high elevation, the first one ever at Mount Lemmon and in the surrounding mountains. So you can see on the sightings map here, here's my sighting in the middle here and all the other sightings. So there's no other sightings around that. So that was pretty significant. I was kind of proud of that sighting. Then in the Marshall Gulch area, got my first look at a red-faced warbler in the Cardinella genus. Very small range overlap into the United States, always at higher elevations, characteristic red facial pattern that you can see there. And then another little yellow-eyed junco. Then spotted towhee, fairly common towhee in the mountain ranges on the West Coast. Very similar to the eastern towhees we have back home. In fact, they used to be part of the same species, but they were split in 1995. Similar also to the green-tailed towhee that is found in lower elevations. These guys are higher elevations. Next is Canoa Ranch Conservation Park in the town of Green Valley, just south of Tucson, Arizona. Large estate, but I birded only around the 30-acre portion here. There is a lake here that's not seen on this image because I think it was still under construction. It's a man-made lake. Got a close look at a redhead duck that's found at home. So it was a cool look here. Had some cool raptor flybys, peregrine falcon on the left, Swainson's hawk on the right. Swainson's hawk is in the Buteo genus, similar to red-tailed hawk. They're very long-distance migrants. They breed in the western US and they winter all the way down in South America. Northern rough-winged swallow. Curve-billed thrasher, very common thrasher. Seen these guys a lot in the desert lowlands. Perches conspicuously loud, they sing. Very different than the similar crystal thrasher, which is very skulky. I saw them, but did not get photographs. Another vermilion flycatcher and black-throated sparrow. So next is Madera Canyon, one of the premier birding locations, not just in the state, but in all of the United States. And this was my route. I started at the Proctor parking trailhead, then I came up to the White House picnic area, Madera Canyon picnic area, and eventually to Santa Rita Lodge, where I spent some time there. It's a lodge with a very extensive feeder setup, known for attracting lots of hummingbirds. And then in the area, there's other hotels that have their own feeder setups, the Kubo B&B, Chuparosa Inn, stopped there. And then I stopped over at the Mount Wrightson picnic area. And the next day I did a hike on the Carrie Nation Mine Trail up into the higher elevations. This is a landscape of Madera Canyon. So I got my first look at the painted redstart. These guys are a New World warbler, small breeding range in the United States. They prefer higher elevation pine oak forests, not at all related to the American redstart, which is in a different genus. And then wild turkeys, which interestingly were very, very common at high elevations, which I was not expecting. It was pretty cool. Got my first look at a hepatic tanager and a good photo. This was at the Santa Rita Lodge. Piranga genus tanager. Small range in the United States. Look very similar to the summer tanager. The way you tell them apart is they have this grayish back, grayish patch on the lower, and or gray auricular patch. Yellow-eyed junco again. Black grosbeak, black-headed grosbeak. Very similar to rose-breasted grosbeak that we have out east. These guys are fairly common in the Sky Islands. So some more, these are males, some more black-headed grosbeaks. Bridal titmouse on the left, non-migratory titmouse found in the pine oak forests. Then there's a female black-headed grosbeak. Broad-billed hummingbird. These are very tiny hummingbirds. They were the most commonly encountered hummingbirds on this trip with over 40 sightings throughout the trip. They are very aggressive at the feeders. They attack other hummingbirds, as I observed, and they're very, very vocal. They make this chit, 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 so you always know when they're there. Then there's the black-chinned hummingbird, appropriately named. They are a West Coast hummingbird in the Archilochus genus, which is the same genus as the ruby-throated hummingbird that we have back home. Another look at the same bird. Then we have Rivoli's hummingbird, or as I call them, Ravioli's hummingbird. They are a very large hummingbird in the high elevation pine oak forests. Used to be known as the magnificent hummingbird, but it was recently split with the Mexican Talamanca hummingbird. These guys were a fairly common sight in this area. Another Mexican jay. This is at Santa Rita Lodge. Acorn woodpecker, also in the Melanarpes genus, but behaves very, very differently than the red-bellied woodpecker back home. They're very gregarious, always seen in family groups. They depend on acorns as a food source, and they have these community acorn stores called granaries. They're known to have large-scale territorial disputes with rival factions, and some recent studies have shown that some individuals from far away, miles away, unrelated to the rival factions, come and just watch the dispute. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Another look at a painted redstart. And this is a painted redstart acting like a hummingbird. Another bridal titmouse. Townsend's warbler, another Satophaga genus warbler, common on the West Coast, passing migrant. Some mammals, Arizona gray squirrel, endemic to the mountains and canyons around Arizona. Very, very seldom seen, so much that it was listed as data deficient on the IUCN Red List. There's just not enough data to even determine what the population is like. So I thought that was a cool find. Then white-nosed coati, also in the raccoon family. This guy tried to raid all the feeders at Santa Rita Lodge and was chased off by the turkeys, which was hilarious. Just a note on the elegant trogon. I was a major gold bird for the trip. I heard them on 3 separate locations, but never saw them. So I never got any photos, but I thought it was important to mention. They're the only breeding trogon in the United States. Another acorn woodpecker, this one with an acorn in its mouth. Arizona woodpecker, very important gold bird for the trip. Another Mexican specialty. Despite its name, most of their range is in Mexico. They have a very similar appearance and they're within the same genus, although this taxonomically disputed, in the same genus as the hairy woodpecker. You tell them apart by the brown coloration on the Arizona woodpecker, as well as all the barring on the chest, on the breast, I mean. My favorite photo of painted redstart on this trip. Red nape sapsucker, similar to the yellow-bellied sapsucker back home. Originally thought to be the same species, was part of a three-way split back in the 1980s with 3 different sapsucker species. Like other sapsuckers, they drill holes in bark and sip sap. My favorite sighting in Madera Canyon was the northern pygmy owl. These are an owl that are native to the mountainous regions of North America. They're diurnal owls, meaning they hunt during the daytime, so they can be seen during the daytime. This one with its prey of some sort of lizard. They are also subject to taxonomic dispute, but I'm not going to get into that now. I did some night birding in the canyon. Saw a lesser nighthawk. These guys are acrobatic flyers at night. Common poor-will, identified by sound. 2-note call, poor-will, 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 and Mexican whippoorwill. 3-note call, whip-poor-will, whip-poor-will. So those are very easy to identify. And lots of bats. So it's crazy. You'll be standing in the canyon and you'll hear these bats just echolocating off of you. You'll feel the echolocation bouncing off of you. So, you know, if you're afraid of bats, don't go here at night, but it was really, truly fascinating. Next, came down a little south into the Tubac area. It's actually where I stayed from Madera Canyon onto the De Anza Trail. It's a 1,200-mile trail that connects San Francisco to Mexico and goes through Arizona. And this small portion of the trail is a desert riparian area. So here I saw more curve-billed thresher, another cactus wren, Cassin's kingbird, fairly common kingbird throughout the whole trip. Very similar to Western kingbird, but note the darker head contrasting with the white throat. Western kingbird is a lot like grayer, more muted gray. Hammond's flycatcher, fairly common empid flycatcher, most similar to dusky flycatcher, which I did not see. Note the short primary projection, and that's how you tell them apart. Common ground dove, smallest ground dove in North America. Only time I saw that one on this trip. Then another Mexican specialty, the northern beardless tyrannulet in the tyrant flycatcher family. I didn't even know I saw this one until I saw my photo later. They are identified best by call, but if you look at them, you can tell them apart from empid flycatchers by the short, stubby, slightly decurved bill and large, blocky head. And then the reason people come to the De Anza Trail is the rose-throated Becard. Another Mexican specialty. The only known breeding pair in the United States resides in this area in the De Anza Trail. So I was very lucky to see the nest and get a photo. Occasionally seen in Texas, but no known breeding pairs as far as I'm aware. Next was the Patagonia area. It's a photo from my Airbnb where I stayed. First stop was Patton Center for Hummingbirds. Pretty extensive feeder setup. It's a little preserve at the edge of the town. So an Anis hummingbird here, Calypte genus, common throughout the west coastern United States. The males have this beautiful red gorget extended to the crown. Another Hammond's flycatcher, another Baird's towhee, note the black facial mask. Rufous winged sparrow. They are a nondescript sparrow with a very limited range in Mexico and a little bit in Arizona. They form lifelong pair bonds. They look like chipping sparrows, but one way to tell them apart is by this double mustache stripe they have at the base of the bill. You can see that pretty clearly here. Only time I saw them on this trip. White crowned sparrow, black phoebe, fairly common phoebe, non-migratory unlike other phoebes. This is a pocket gopher. You can tell it's part of the Thaumamus genus because of the teeth. The teeth do not have grooves here, so they're known as the smooth-toothed pocket gopher genus. Either Badas or Southern is the species. You can't tell them apart here because there's a marking on the back, which you can't see in this photo. So it's part of the genus. Either one of these two based on the range. Green-tailed towhee, fairly common throughout the west and low-lying desert areas, but not often seen because they're skulky and shy. And then American goldfinch, which I didn't really care about that much, but everyone else at Patton's at this time did because it's a regional rarity. So yeah, everyone was like fawning over this goldfinch. I didn't really care that much, but I figured I'd include it. Next is Buick's wren, fairly common wren in this area. They have their own monotypic genus. They actually used to be present in the East Coast United States, though they no longer are. And it's hypothesized that they were outcompeted for territory by the house wren. Then yellow-breasted chat, widespread breeding range, very interesting bird, used to be considered part of the New World warbler family, though they are no longer. Now they have their own monotypic family. Only 2 birds in the United States are members of a monotypic family, the other one being the olive warbler, which I also saw on this trip. And interestingly, they can hybridize with orioles, forming interfamilial hybrids. Yellow-rumped warbler, this is the Audubon subspecies. Compare it to the myrtle subspecies that we see on the East Coast. Note the yellow throat and the lack of facial masking. That's a good way to tell them apart. Western tanager, another Piranga genus tanager, common throughout the range. Saw these guys often. They also apparently are showing up in Manhattan recently. But yeah, beautiful birds. Ladder-backed woodpecker. They are very similar to the East Coast downy woodpecker, found in desert scrub environments. Often saw these guys at feeders. Summer tanager, we see these on the East Coast as well. One thing I learned about them is that they specialize in eating bees and wasps. And I learned that because I also got a photo of this bird eating a wasp. Lazuli bunting, very similar to indigo buntings that we have on the East Coast. This guy was migrating through. I saw these often in large groups. And I did see one indigo bunting that was mixed in with one of the flocks, though I didn't get a photo. And then the reason people come to Patton Center for Hummingbirds is to see the violet-crowned hummingbird. This is a Mexican specialty hummingbird with a breeding range barely overlapping into southern Arizona and not often seen within that range. They're uncommon, but they are regular, and this is one of the known reliable locations to see this bird. Then off to Patagonia Lake State Park. There are 2 locations here that I hit: the Patagonia Birding Trail, which is the most productive checklist of the trip, 57 species, and the Sonowita Creek Wilderness on the other side of the lake. So here I saw a white-faced ibis. It's the West Coast counterpart of our glossy ibis that we have on the east. Western wood pewee, the West Coast counterpart of the eastern wood pewees that we have. They're separated by range. They do have a range overlap, though they're not known to hybridize, which I thought was interesting. Common blackhawk in the Buteo gallus genus, very small range overlap into the US, similar to the zone-tailed hawk, which is also present, and I did see but did not photograph. Way you can tell them apart, main way you can tell them apart is these wing commas that they have, a very important field mark. They can create intergenus hybrids with red-shouldered hawks, by the way, which I found interesting. Eared grebe, most common grebe in the world. Rock squirrel, another ground squirrel. I thought was interesting. I paired it with eared grebe because I think they have funny looking ears. Next is the neotropic cormorant, very similar to the double-crested cormorant. In fact, I saw these in a mixed flock with double-crested cormorants on the shore of the lake. One way to tell them apart is at the base of the mandible, they have this very thin white streak there that you can see. It's an important field mark. Also, they have shorter bills and longer tails relative to body length when in flight. First look ever at a Wilson's phalarope. In the phalarope family, in the phalarope genus, the only member not found at sea. They are often seen on lakes just spinning and spinning in circles. First time I saw that behavior, I thought there was something wrong with the bird, but it turns out it's normal behavior. They use it to create a whirlpool to catch invertebrates. Then cinnamon teal, dabbling duck, very similar to other teals. But note the wider bill, very similar to a shoveler, which is also in the spatula genus. First and only look at a rock wren. These are a monotypic genus of wren, common throughout very dry desert areas. In fact, they don't need to drink water. They get all of their water through their food. They're often found perched on rocks, as this one was. And here's some cows. There are lots of cows in this area. I actually have a video, I didn't include it here, but I have a video of a cow that was following me around. So next destination was the Huachaca Mountains. This is near the town of Sierra Vista. They're a small mountain range, my favorite area of the trip. They is at the base is a desert lowland environment, which is actually at a higher elevation than other desert lowland environments I visited. So there's actually a more interesting mix of environment of birds in the lowland area. So I visited these regions, Ramsey Canyon, Carr Canyon, where I went to the birded at the Reef Campground, Miller Canyon, and then the Ash Canyon Bird Sanctuary, all circled here. A lot of these signs around, caution about smuggling and illegal immigration traffic, which I have a story about I'll get into in a second. This is at Carr Canyon. Carr Canyon Road is a very treacherous, windy dirt mountain road that my rental car was not suitable for, but I drove up it anyway. And this is Carr Peak. It's absolutely beautiful in this area. So in the Reef Campground, one of the birds that I saw was the buff-breasted flycatcher, another emperor flycatcher. True to the name, has a buff belly, makes it easy to tell apart from other emperor flycatchers, another Mexican specialty. Olive warbler, another monotypic family bird, also not really a warbler, found only at very high elevations over 8,500 feet. Then short-tailed hawk. This is actually another fairly significant find. These are a tropical hawk that are not often seen in this area, very rarely seen in the United States outside of Florida. And this was actually the first sighting in the area since 2018. So over 3 years elapsed since one was seen in the area. They look quite similar to Swainton's hawk, but one way to tell them apart is the rufous patch at the base of the head, at the shoulder. In this Swainton's hawk, it kind of extends further. In the short-tailed hawk, it ends at the shoulder. This one looks like it was carrying prey. Initially, I thought it was nesting material, but I think it's actually prey. Another western tanager. This was at Ramsey Canyon Preserve, where I also heard another elegant trogon. Another bridal titmouse. This one has a hairdo thing going on. Another female black-headed grosbeak. Then we have a bush tit, very tiny passerine bird, only New World member of the bush tit family. These guys were fairly common, but hard to photograph. Chipping sparrow, we're all used to that bird. Brewer's sparrow, similar nondescript sparrow, breeds in sagebrush. They are identified best by their song. They have a very, very long song lasting 30 seconds to a minute. So anytime you hear a sparrow with a very long song, almost certainly a brewer's sparrow. Lark sparrow, very large sparrow, fairly common throughout this area. And this is all at Ash Canyon Bird Sanctuary, by the way. Another look at a hooded oriole. Like all orioles, even though they're kind of skulky, they cannot resist grape jelly. This is a Bullock's oriole, fairly common oriole throughout the West Coast. It's kind of like the West Coast counterpart of the Baltimore oriole. They are known to hybridize. They were found pretty often in desert riparian areas. Again, can't resist the grape jelly. Then another oriole, the Scott's oriole, also can't resist grape jelly, just like all orioles. These guys are reliant on the yucca plant, and they were named after Winfield Scott, who was a general in the Mexican-American War. They look quite similar to Baltimore orioles in terms of their color pattern, but note the yellow coloration as opposed to orange. Another photo of a lazuli bunting. Another grade roadrunner, ladder-backed woodpecker. Another Mexican jay. This one let me get pretty close. Rufous hummingbird. Largest migration per body length of any bird in the world. Special to see one of these. Another broad-billed hummingbird. Lucifer hummingbird. So one of the major goal birds of the trip. Very tiny purple-throated hummingbird. They have best identified by their longer decurved bill. Another Mexican specialty, very seldom seen. The Ash Canyon Bird Sanctuary is probably the best place in the entire country to see these birds. Here's another view of the same bird. You can see that gorgeous purple gorget. Then another black phoebe, another Rivalese hummingbird. Another Anis hummingbird, note the red crown. Then elf owl. This is at Batiste Bird Garden. Smallest owl in the entire world, about the size of a sparrow. They nest in saguaro cacti, although this one was nesting in a telephone pole. So at Batiste Bird Garden, it's probably the best place to see one of these guys. They've had a breeding pair that's been visiting for over 20 years. Probably not the same individuals, but breeding pairs visiting for over 20 years. Okay, so this is by far my favorite bird of the entire trip, the spotted owl, Mexican subspecies. So there's a little story behind this bird. I had no idea where to find this bird, and I really wanted to find it. So speaking to some of the locals, they directed me towards Miller Canyon. Had no idea where in Miller Canyon to find one, so I figured the Miller Canyon Trail might be the best location. So as I'm walking up, I'm approached by who I think is a park ranger, and he asked me if I see anyone coming the other way, you know, to let him know. And I was like, hey, is anything wrong? Is there someone lost or hurt? You know, he's like, no, actually, we're looking for some illegal traffic. That's when I realized that he was not a park ranger. In fact, he was border patrol. And he was looking for a backpack that was full of drugs that was left by a smuggler, and they were trying to intercept the person who was picking up the backpack. So I was like, no, I haven't seen anyone, but I'll let you know. But by the way, have you seen the spotted owl? And surprisingly, he actually did know where the spotted owl was. So he directed me towards this landmark about a quarter mile up the trail called Split Rock. He said that's where people normally see it. And coincidentally, that's also the location where the smugglers leave the backpacks. So he was going to the same location. So I'm walking up the trail with this border patrol agent, and I get up, I hear the owl vocalizing right near the spot. And then I finally lock eyes on it. I'm like, I got it. And the border patrol guy looks at me. I'm like, the owl. And he's like, good job. So that was funny, but I had the most special experience with this bird. I mean, I observed it respectfully for, you know, over half an hour. And as I was just standing there in the same spot, it came closer to me. I think it was more curious about me than I was of it. So it was just a really, truly, truly special experience. So I got tons of photos of this bird. This was probably my favorite one. Here's it preening. You can see those big claws. Look at those claws. Then after that, I went to the Chiricahua Mountains, hit some locations there. This is Cave Creek Canyon down here on the South Fork area, productive area. Rustler Park up here, the town of Portal, and then the town of Paradise. On Cave Creek Canyon, I got my first look at the blue-throated mountain gem, the largest hummingbird that can be seen in the entire United States. Another Mexican species. Cave Creek Canyon is probably the best place to see them in the United States. Brown-crested flycatcher, the largest member of the Marcus genus, which also contains the ash-throated flycatcher and great-crested flycatcher. Note the very, very large bill. I did observe one in Patagonia eating a lizard. Unfortunately, I did not get a photo of that, but that was pretty interesting. And then we have hairy woodpecker, common back home, similar to that Arizona woodpecker. In Cave Creek Canyon, I actually did see them in a mixed flock. I saw them together. That was cool. Then some mammals, cliff chipmunk. These guys nest on cliffs. They're fairly common in the canyons at higher elevations. Got a nice photo of this one. Squirrel, Mexican fox squirrel. This is the Chiricahua subspecies. They are an endemic subspecies to the Chiricahua Mountains, not very commonly seen. So it was cool to see one of these. Then I went up to Rustler Park at a very high elevation. This is the view from near the peak. And the reason I went there was to see Mexican chickadees, which unfortunately I did not see. But I did see Western bluebirds, so this was life bird for me there. Very similar to the Eastern bluebird, which for some reason also has a range overlap in the southeast corner of Arizona. One way to tell them apart is the blue throat. The Eastern bluebirds have an orange throat. Western bluebirds have a blue throat, as well as blue on the breast. Another curve-billed thrasher. This is now in the town of Portal. And another lifer, the Inca dove. Very similar to the common ground dove, but note the fully scaled back. This was a life bird, the only life bird that I got while I was eating lunch. More cactus wren, another ladder-backed woodpecker. You can really see that ladder-back pattern here. Another yellow-breasted chat, another Pyrrhuxia. This is all in the town of Portal. A lot of the townspeople here have their own little feeder setups that you can sit by. That's where all these were seen. Bullock's oriole again. Black-headed grosbeak, chipping sparrow, western screech owl. They're the western counterpart of the eastern screech owl we have on this side of the country. Interestingly, they are co-present with the whiskered screech owl, which look very similar. They're told apart by voice. I did hear one in the canyon at night. The one way to tell the difference between the vocalizations is the whiskered screech owl has their song or call is much longer and more drawn out than the western screech owl. This was a known individual. I didn't hear it calling, but it was a known individual at this location. Juniper titmouse, very common throughout the Great Basin region, uncommon in this area, so it was cool to see. This was in the town of Paradise. They actually were lumped together with oak titmouse. They were split at some point in time. Broad-tailed hummingbird, not broad-billed. This was the most common hummingbird I saw in this region, seen at higher altitudes. They have a red throat, but not a red crown. They are notable. The males have these outer feathers on the wings that create a very identifiable loud flight sound. So they sound like a spaceship when they're flying by you. It's very, very interesting. Woodhouse's scrub jay, another member of the scrub jay family, similar to the Mexican jay. Note the white eyebrow. That's how you tell them apart. And then spotted ground squirrel. Very closely related to the round-tailed ground squirrel in the Sonoran Desert. Now we're in the Chihuahuan Desert, so these guys are more common. Note the spots on the back. And a quick note on the Montezuma quail. This is a very, very seldom seen species of quail. I did see one for like 2 seconds in the town of Paradise. I was happy to see one. Unfortunately, was not able to get a photo, but just wanted to mention that. Very rarely seen. So after the Chiricahuas, I made my way back to Tucson and I stopped quickly at Lake Cochise, which is and the Wilcox Playa, which is a dry lake bed, former bombing range that is an important area for overwintering sandhill cranes as well as wintering waterfowl. Second largest checklist of the trip with 46 species observed. Here I saw an American avocet, or a few American avocets. Note the upturned bill. It's adapted for catching marine invertebrates, often seen in shallow water. And believe it or not, they're known for, they've been observed being brood parasites. So it's not just cowbirds and cuckoos, also American avocets. So I thought that was interesting. A few more photos of the same bird. Scaled quail, quite similar to the Gambel's quail. But note the extensive scaling characteristic of the name. Similar in behavior, also very skulky. I was very lucky to get a photo of one. And then on my last day of the trip, I came back to Tucson and I visited this El Rio open space preserve in the northwest corner of Tucson, which acts as a collecting basin for mountain runoff. It's a riparian zone, a wetland habitat, kind of similar to Sweetwater wetlands. Had a white-winged dove here. Long-billed bowwitcher, cool site. And black-necked stilt. Note the very long leg length to body size proportion. These guys constantly vocalize, and they're actually similar to the American avocet, who they have been known to create intergeneric hybrids with. So some conclusions. First bird of the trip was a rock pigeon. First life bird, as we discussed, was great-tailed grackle. Last life bird was McGillivray's warbler, which I saw at the El Rio Open Space Preserve. Fortunately, did not get a photo because they are very hard to photograph. Last bird was also rock pigeon. These were both at the airport. 202 state birds throughout the whole trip. 5 birds in the state of New Mexico because I did eat lunch one day in New Mexico. Overall, 115 life birds total. My favorite bird by far was the Mexican spotted owl. My photo nemesis was the elegant trogon, who I heard 3 times but never saw. And my biggest nemesis of all is actually the canyon wren, which is actually very common in almost every area that I visited, but I never saw one. So there's that. And that's it. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Trevor, this is Mike Jackledge. Great presentation. What time of year did you do this trip? I missed that.
Yeah, so this was April of 2021. So I went in at the end of April and stayed to the first week of May. So it was kind of peak migration season for the area, although it was not the peak of hummingbird migration. Hummingbird migration in the area peaks closer to July, August. So if you really want to go and get the most hummingbird species, that's a better time to go.
Great. Thank you.
I have a question. What time of day did you see most of your birds?
That's a good question. I mean, typically in the mornings, I would usually get up around 6 a.m., start birding at 6 a.m. But I would say, I mean, birds were abundant throughout the day, pretty much. Less so probably in the afternoon where it was the hottest, but particularly in the canyons where the temperature is cooler. I feel like I saw a lot of bird species throughout the day. In fact, in the Wilcox Wildlife Area, where I had my second largest checklist with over 40 species, that was actually in the afternoon. That was around 2 p.m., I think.
Were you with the group or did you do this by yourself?
This was 100% by myself.
I have to I'm impressed. Your knowledge on the birds that you saw were fabulous. Your photographs were wonderful with you identifying key places to look for identification. The background that you gave us on the birds was magnificent. By far one of the best presentations I've ever seen. So being that you've only been doing this since 2017, 2018, you've done an absolutely marvelous job. And oh, please keep up the good work. You're absolutely wonderful.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Hi, Trevor. I think a few people have been asking this. What camera did you use and what lens?
So I have a Nikon D850 and a Tamron 150 to 600 lens.
Trevor, the birds that are in the cactus, do they get their water from the cactus too?
I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know.
Okay, there's Trevor, there's a few questions in the chat. A couple people asked whether you saw any birds actually nesting in the cactus.
I did not see any nesting activity, no.
It's just time of year, it's a little bit early.
Yeah, probably a little bit early. You know, I did see the Lucy's warbler that I think was nesting, but it wasn't in a saguaro cactus. So yeah, it's probably a little too early to see birds that were actually nesting. They were probably in the nest building phase.
Okay, and another question, did you create your own itinerary or base it on something, you know, somebody else's suggestions?
Kind of a little bit of both. I created my own itinerary in the sense that I planned out day to day where I was going to go. I planned out the route, but I did take some suggestions from other birders who have visited the area in the past. I spoke to both who are probably known to some people in the group, Tim Healy and Brent Baumkamp, who have also done similar trips, and I took a lot of cues from their trips as well as blending it with some of my own ideas. So I think it worked out pretty well.
Trevor, how long did you stay in each area spot when you were birding?
Usually about 2 to 3 days in each location. I spent 3 days in Madera Canyon and then 3 days in the Chiricahua area, but the other locations were 2 days.
And did you do a lot of hiking from one spot to the next, or were you driving to the high points and just doing half a mile to a mile?
A little bit of both. So, for example, in Madera Canyon, where I parked at the base and I hiked all the way up to Mount Wrights, and that was probably about 5 miles of hiking that day. But then other locations like Mount Lemon, I kind of drove to different points. So I did both.
So we have one other question in the chat, which is, what was the temperature range you experienced?
That is actually very interesting. So it really varies according to elevation. So at the desert floor, really it can be 90 to 100 degrees like almost every day. But as you get into the canyons and the mountains, it's a lot cooler. I'd say probably the average is around 70 to 80. And then in places like Rustler Park, which was near the peak of the Chiricahuas, I was very ill prepared. It went down to, it was like 40 degrees when I was up there.
Trevor, when you were, were you in Saguaro National Forest? You know, outside of Tucson. I think it's outside of Tucson. Well, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter. Did you see any wild boars?
I did not go to Saguaro National Park, but I was, that Airbnb is actually very close. So it's kind of the same environment. I did not see any wild boars though.
Okay.
Trevor, you mentioned a number of birds were New World birds. What makes them a New World bird?
Meaning that they're from the the Western Hemisphere. So
thank
New
you.
World birds native to North America and South America. Old World birds would be Africa, Europe, Asia.
Thank you.
We have a question about whether you think this would be a safe trip for solo or maybe two women to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, I saw many solo and duo women birders throughout the trip that were doing similar trips.
Mm.
Say about the what do you call it, the border patrol, you know. Trevor, somebody asked in the group about when you saw the bobcat, right?
Yeah.
How close you were. And of course, I know what you told me the story because we were like, oh my God, you know, because this is my nephew. So we're like praying for him, you know, after we wanted to kill him actually. But, you know, so Trevor explained, because somebody, I saw the chat come up and say, the person asked, how close were you? So to explain that, what happened to you?
Yeah. So
Trev.
yeah, so I was actually kneeled down. I was kneeled down and sitting at the edge of the little pond, photographing the Sora. And then out of the corner of the eye, I just see this bobcat approaching me, and I was like really scared for a second because I wasn't really sure what was going on. I was like, "There's a mountain lion. What is this?" Then I realized it wasn't that big, so I was like, "Oh, it's probably a bobcat." And I kind of just stayed still, and then it just sat down. So it sat down within probably about 10 feet of me, and it was just kind of looking at
Wow.
me. And I just turned my camera around and just started taking pictures of it. And then I just got up and walked away, and it kind of just walked past me, and that was it.
Yeah, amazing.
How
So-
long was your entire trip, Trevor?
Say again?
How long was your entire trip?
2 weeks, so 14 days.
Wow.
So
Okay.
we have another question. Would you do anything differently? And did you bring a scope?
I did not bring a scope. I actually do not own a scope. And would I do anything differently? Yes, I probably would have spent more time in the Huachaca Mountains, which were my favorite area. And I probably would spend less time trying to get a photograph of the elegant trogon. I feel like I wasted a lot of time on that bird. Yeah, so I feel like, especially in the Chiricahuas, I probably wasted too much time on that bird. There's probably a lot more to see that I missed in that area. There were other parks that I could have gone to that I just didn't go to.
Trevor, this is Nancy in Arizona. What an amazing trip you did in such a short period of time,
Absolutely.
and saw so many birds that, you know, I've spent, you know, all my vacations down there, and it, you know, I sympathize with you on the Montezuma quail. Sorry you missed the elegant trogon, but they are tricky. I will say one thing, it is the Huachuca Mountains, not the Huachaca. It's a misspelling and a mispronunciation. And we call them saguaros here, not saguaros. The G's are pronounced like W in Awa and saguaro.
Thanks.
And actually Cochise is another one. Cochise, it's the name of a county, so we hear it often.
So,
But fantastic trip and amazing photos.
Amazing
So-
photos.
so
Yeah.
another question, do you consider yourself a photographer or a birder?
Kind of both. I feel like if I could give myself any category, it'd probably be a birder with a camera. But yeah, I guess a little bit of both.
Yeah, he's got an eye.
Yeah, very
Mm.
good eye. So
Are there any-
it was an amazing presentation, Trevor.
Yes, thank
Yes.
you.
Fabulous. Yes.
Terrific.
Fabulous and everything, and as such a description, it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Are there any more questions for Trevor?
Trevor, how close were you to the Mexican border? And did you have any sightings of patrols and so forth?
So in the town of Sierra Vista, that is fairly close to the Mexican border. I think that's probably the closest I got. And that was the only time I saw border patrol. Also, actually, so I went in the Madera Canyon area. There actually was a border patrol checkpoint that I had to drive through every day, but they kind of just waved me through.
So.
I'm sorry if I'm, oh, excuse me.
Sorry. I'm just, another question from chat, which I'll sort of rephrase it. How many different hotels and B&Bs did you stay in during your trip?
I think about 5 or 6. All Airbnbs, every single one of them.
Hmm.
Did not stay in any hotels.
I'm sorry if I missed your answer to this, but what camera did you use?
Nikon D850.
Great job.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a bird or whatever. I'm listening, I'm learning. I keep saying I'm gonna join the Audubon, you know, and I've learned stuff with Trevor. And this whole thing is wonderful. So I just want, Trevor, you're something else, baby. Good job.
Thanks.
Sorry. Oh my goodness.
Really fantastic presentation, Trevor.
Thanks.
You're
All right,
welcome.
if there are no other questions, I think we will wrap it up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
I-
very
It was
much,
great
Trevor. That was
having you.
terrific.
yeah.
All right. Thanks,
Oh,
guys.
actually, tiny story, how Trevor got to do this.
Oh, yeah.
Peggy
Yeah,
and Peggy and I ran into him at a park.
Oh,
Right?
and said,
Yeah, that was-
"Oh."
that was actually the day I got back. That
Yeah.
was like 2 hours after I got out of JFK. I was like I was still in like birding mode, so I had to just like go out and continue birding. So I went to Hempstead Lake State Park, which is by my parents' house, and then I ran into the group, and I just kind of started talking to them, and I was explaining, hey, I just got off a plane from Arizona, and they asked me to give the presentation. So
that's true. Thank you.
Wow, that was awesome.
Yeah, that was wonderful. Thank you.
Trevor,
Trevor, one person asked if you'd rent a different vehicle when you said you had difficulty on the one trip, one part of the trip. Would you rent a different vehicle?
no, because that would have been a lot more expensive. And I was able to finagle with the Mazda, and it did okay.
Good.
Well,
Thanks again. That was
Thank
great.
you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
fabulous.
thank you.
Trevor, I'm gonna get in touch with you about something else, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Trevor, real quick question. Would you consider leading a group out there?
Probably not. I did run into a couple guys, and they were much more knowledgeable about the area than I am.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, maybe that would be good information to know about, that people that want to go out to Arizona to see a birding.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe if you can get some information for us, we could post it or whatever on the website.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, and also the recording of the presentation will be posted on the North Shore Audubon YouTube channel.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
And
Oh,
I'll
great.
put up links to that.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Trevor, thank you so very much. Everybody, thank you for
Thank you.
joining
Thank
us.
you.